Hi, gang. I get a lot of requests for demonstrating and teaching picking technique, and so I figured it's about high time that I started doing videos about that. And I figured where to start other than with the pick. It seems like that's the most basic of all elements that we can start with. So, in one sense, this is very, very trivial. I just want to sell you on the idea that you want to use a thick pick. And that's fine. If that's good enough for you, you can turn off the video right now and go and choose your favorite thick pick, and that's good. But I do have some thoughts in terms of if you're beginning this stuff versus if you're more advanced, what are the things you want to look for? And I want to give you an idea about all the different picks you could choose from. Because you know what's kind of cool about it? I'm a huge fan of looking at different picks and trying out tons of them and trying to figure out which one works for you. The reason is because you can go into any music store, and if you're like me, you hate to walk out empty-handed in a music store. And I gotta tell you, it's a lot better on your wallet if you walk out with a pick or two or 10 than if you walk out with a pedal or a new guitar or an amp or even a set of strings. So looking at lots of picks, I think is a good, and trying out lots of different picks, I think is a good practice. So let's take a look at some of those. I want to show you what I think are good for beginners, what are some standard ones that work, and I'll show you what are some of my favorite picks and why. All right, see you in just a second. Okay, gang, let's take a look at some of these picks. And like I said, the most important criterion is how thick it is. Now, I'm going to recommend that you use at least 1 millimeter in thickness. And in that way, it's not going to flop around as much and be unpredictable, especially if you're just starting out in terms of gaining speed at alternate picking. Then you're going to want a pick that's very, very predictable to you, and a thicker pick is going to get you there. So let's start out by looking at that. Now, we're going to look at a lot of picks, and I'm going to go pretty quickly. I want to show you some standards. What are some of the differences that you want to choose from? And then I'll show you what I think are some good beginner picks, and then what are some of my favorite picks that I like. All right, so first things first, I want to show these to scale. This is how big these picks are. Now, I wish Amazon would do this with all their picks. Oh, no, I'm out of focus. That I don't wish they would do. There it is right there. Now, I've got my wristwatch in there for perspective. But every time I see these picks, they show a picture of a pick super close up. There's no idea how big it is. And you know what? That really matters to me as a player. Anyway, here are some standard picks. You can see there's a couple Fender picks up there. These are just plastic, and these are both heavies. This one's called the California Clear, and this just the differences in all these are there's different materials and so forth. There's different plastic type of materials. There's different grips. This is called a gator grip, which actually doesn't grip very well. All right. So for some reason, a lot of people seem to drop their picks. It doesn't seem to be a problem that I have, but if you do have that problem, grip on a pick material does affect that. So you want to try a bunch of different ones. Speaking of grips, here are some nylon ones down here. And these are Dunlop Max grips. And the one thing about nylon is it flops around a little bit more than other plastics. So you probably want to go up in thickness a little bit if you're doing that. But you can see it's got little bumps on it that help you grip on. At the bottom, I've got a couple of, there's a Clayton pick, heavy. And there's a bone pick right there from Clayton that's actually pretty cheap. You know, you can buy all sorts of picks in all sorts of exotic materials, probably topaz and tiger claw if you want it. But a bone is one of those that's pretty common, and there's a bone pick that you can get fairly cheaply, you know, for a few bucks. All right. Let's take a look at some of the other things that you have to choose from. These at the top here, whoops, let's see if I can get this into focus. There we go. These at the top here are what are called jazz picks. Now they're smaller. You immediately see that they're smaller than the standard size, right? Let me move that in for comparison. They're smaller, and because of that, you're going to, some people don't like them, or some people like them more. Here's some really, these are some, you can even get more exotic than that. Here's some very bizarre shapes. In my opinion, they work terribly. Here's a David Grisman pick, which is obviously very rounded. The corners are very rounded. It's made for mandolin, but it works well for guitar. Here's even talk about exotic. This is made out of agate, and it's about 4 or 5 millimeters thick. Not for me, but might work for you. And here's a really interesting idea, the Dava pick. The idea is that when you grip it near the end, like this, you can use it for strumming because it flexes a lot. See that? But when you grip it close to the tip, it doesn't flex at all, and you can use it for lead playing, and so alternate picking is good. Okay, now that I've got it back into focus, in my opinion, even if you're holding it at the tip, it's still too flexible. It doesn't work for me, but it may work for you, so you can give it a try. But in theory, it's great. Now let's take a look at some beginner picks. Now here are some picks that I'm calling beginner picks, but you know, they're great picks, and they can work forever for you if you want. The reason I'm calling them beginner picks is because I think they work great for beginners. So what's great about them? So the only thing that singles them out is that they have rounded tips. They are thick. They're all thick. The thinnest one I've got here, thinnest one I've got here is this one, which is the Fender, which is probably about 1 millimeter. Here's a D'Addario Planet Wave, glow in the dark, pretty cool. Here's a Dunlop Tortex 2.0, a Dunlop Big Stubby, which come in 2 and 3.0. And then here are Dunlop Jazz Tones. What I like about all of these, the Jazz Tone, this is the only choice here that's a small size, if you like that small jazz size. And here's a standard size Jazz Tone. These are very thick, maybe even 3 millimeter thick picks. They're pretty thick, 2.5. In any event, the reason why I like the rounded ones is they're more forgiving when you're learning how to pick. One of the things that you want to be very precise about is how deep you are with the strings, and you're going to see very quick progress with these types of picks, quicker than if you use the pointed tips. All right, let me show you some of what I'd say are advanced picks, and some of the ones that I like. Now over here we've got a Jazz 3, the Dunlop Jazz 3. It's got a pointed tip. And one of the things with a pointed tip is it's a little less forgiving, but it does give you a little bit more articulation on the attack. And so that's why I think, Guthrie Govan recommends, among other things, a pointed tip. My personal favorite, there's a D'Addario Durolin pick. This is about 1.5 millimeters. Here's another one of those Jazz Tones. And here's an Ultex, a great material, by the way. I happen to like it. If you're a fan of grippy picks, it grips pretty well, but it's also pretty stiff. And I like the tone that it gives me. Got a sharp tip. In fact, it's called the Dunlop Ultex Sharp. Here's some of my faves, my favorite picks right now. For some reason, I love this size of the Jazz Tone, which is the jazz size. I normally don't like small, super small picks, and I also love this Dunlop Ultex Sharp, but I've kind of gravitated to these right here in the center, I think largely because they're somewhat in between the standard size and the jazz size. Right here we've got this is actually the Dunlop Jazz 3 XL in an Ultex version. Nice pick. This one is kind of a goofy pick. It's made out of buffalo horn by Iron Age Picks. But what I love about it is it's in between those sizes, and it's very, very stiff. Somehow it's still got a great feel on those strings. My personal favorite right now is the Dunlop John Petrucci pick, which to me is the perfect size pick, a perfect compromise between big and small. And it's a 1.5 millimeter, so it's very stiff. It's got a cool edge on it. I really like that. So anyway, that's probably more than you ever wanted to know about picks. Lots of different choices, lots of different things. I advise you to try out a bunch of them. Use those rounded ends if you're just starting out, but get yourself a thick pick. Try a bunch of them and have at it, Hoss. Have a lot of fun, and we'll see you on down the road. Bye.